Baseball isn't just numbers, numbers, numbers.
This game is not being played on computers.
You don't do that with a bunch of statistical gimmicks.
You don't put a team together with a computer.
We're talking weighted runs created plus,
expected WOBA,
his sweet spot rate,
defensive runs above average,
average exit velocity,
barrel rate,
xFIP,
BABIP,
SIERA.
We are
above replacement radio.
And welcome to Above Replacement Radio, episode 346 and a half. I am your host, Daniel Curran, joined by Chris Gianta. Chris, I am doing the intro today, a little bit of a change of pace. And we are happy to be joined by a special guest on today's show. We are joined by MLB.com senior writer, published author, and current Cleveland Guardians beat reporter for MLB.com, Anthony Castrovince. Anthony, thank you for joining ARR today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Above replacement, and I am a replacement level Guardians writer for a 10-day stretch out in spring trading, so that works out.
Well, you know, you're gonna have one of those. You're gonna have like one of those 30 plate appearance seasons where you're actually on pace for like 17 WAR. That's. I think that's how your coverage has been so far, personally.
If you can't be 17 WAR, pace in spring training, I don't know what you're doing, because in February, everybody's good. It's so easy. The players are in good mood. Nobody's struck out yet. Nobody's lost a game yet. And so it's an easy place to get good work done. That's for sure.
Everyone's in the best shape of their life.
Exactly. Not me, but everyone else. Sure.
So you have been writing at MLB.com for a while, and I'm sure you've been into baseball for even longer. So what are your baseball upbringings, and what kind of led you to eventually become involved with the game as a writer?
Well, it was the only sport I truly enjoyed playing, and not that I was good, but it was the only one I had any marginal success in. So I think I gravitated towards that, and then I loved just the rhythm of the game, the length. I frankly loved the length of the season. I loved playing my little hardball computer game and simulating a season, and I don't know if I ever even finished that season, but I just loved that idea of the length of the summer, baseball season covering the length of the summer and the storylines that come with it. And I gravitated towards writing very quickly at a young age. And I knew I wasn't any good at sports, so I wanted to write about them. And but honestly, I never thought I'd actually get into baseball writing specifically when I did go to college and pursue sports writing in general. I remember telling a recruiter from a newspaper that I can't see myself covering 162 games. But lo and behold, that's where the best opportunity was for me after college, and fell in love with it again. I fell in love with it a different way. And it's just been a great experience for me, great exposure to, other cultures, all kinds of people. I love baseball. I love baseball people. I love the people within the game. Like I said, I love the rhythm of it. I love that it's always evolving. I haven't liked every element of the evolution, but I do like that they've, the measures they've taken in the last couple of years to get that old pace back from when I was growing up. And so yeah, it's just been a really great experience.
Yeah, it is a very popular I guess writer phrase is, the only thing you're rooting for are quick games and stories is what they're is what they're aiming at. Heard that from a couple people. But yeah, so you started working for Major League Baseball starting in 2004. What was kind of, I guess, your route getting there?
Yeah, that was a very early stage in MLB.com's existence. And because it had just launched a few years earlier in 2001. And I had a real lucky break in that the person who covered the Cleveland Indians at the time for MLB.com, their original Cleveland Indians beat reporter, was a gentleman by the name of Justice B. Hill. And I was at Ohio University, and we were on a quarters system, which means we had 10-week quarters instead of longer semesters. And he came down to be a visiting professor during the off season, during our winter quarter. And we just hit it off. He became a mentor to me, and that led to some freelance opportunities while I was still in college in 2003. And again, like I said, I really loved it. I really loved covering it. I would come up a couple of times and cover a series, cover the visiting team if the writer come in. I loved it right away, and I knew it was a place I wanted to work because it was a place where I knew I could grow as it was growing, and I had gone to college thinking I wanted to write for a newspaper, which seems pretty quaint now. And so to get in on sort of the ground floor of what's become a major media company at MLB.com was awesome. And yeah, so from there, I was our first intern, or our first editorial
Wow.
intern the following year, helping Justice out with Indians coverage. And that led to me getting a full-time job as a beat reporter for the Cincinnati Reds for a season. And then I moved back home when Justice moved to another role. I moved back home to cover the Indians for a stretch, and that led to an opportunity to become a national guy. And lo and behold, here we are all these years later. It's crazy,
I mean, what a glass ceiling moment, right? First
right?
first
Yeah.
intern. They gotta hang
Well,
your
that's only because
name.
I pestered the editor long enough. They're like, all right, let's give this guy $7 an hour to shut him up.
Sure. No, they gotta like hang your name in the rafters at like MLB headquarters or something. That's
Sure, sure.
quite the accomplishment. Do you remember the first game that you covered?
I do. Yeah, as I said, when I was still in college, I came up for a weekend series. And it was the Rangers. It was the Rangers of A-Rod, and Buck Showalter was the manager. Rafael Palmeiro was right on the verge of his 500th home run, and I was kind of freaking out because I was like, "Am I gonna am I gonna be the one covering Rafael Palmeiro's 500th home run?" Didn't end up happening in Cleveland, but yeah, I came up for a weekend, made a few bucks, got that first taste of covering Major League Baseball, and was addicted ever since.
There you go. What was it like? I mean, do you remember like going on the field or going in the clubhouse for the first time? Like, what was that feeling of like seeing all of it up
Yeah,
close like that?
actually, I should edit this because a year earlier was actually my first time in a Major League clubhouse. I was interning for
Really?
something called Scripps Howard News Service in Washington, D.C. So I was based in D.C., and I would take any opportunity they'd give me to go up to Baltimore. This is before the Nationals existed, and so they were still the Montreal Expos. So I would take the train up to Baltimore, and occasionally did a couple stories there. So that wasn't like game coverage or anything, but it was like go up there. The Yankees. I think the Yankees were the first clubhouse I was in. They were the visiting team up at Camden Yards, and it goes to show you can recover from absolute embarrassment because I didn't know any protocols, nothing. And the New York Yankees, the star-laden Yankees, they're just post dynasty at that point, but stars all over the place. And I approached Roger Clemens to interview him, and he stared a hole through me, just a death stare, and said, "I'm pitching today." And I was like, "I'm sorry, I had no idea that
Mm.
you don't approach." Especially that starting pitcher. You don't approach a starting pitcher on the day he started. How would I know such a thing? I had no idea. So I'm sure the Yankee beat writers were laughing at me behind my back in that moment. But I've since recovered, and now I know the protocols now. So that's good.
That's yeah. I mean, that's hey, if you can bounce back from that, that's excellent. We'll
That's
say
right.
this for off air, but Chris and I have a kind of a similar clubhouse story from a few years ago.
Yeah, no, it
What do you got?
involves yeah, it involves someone who was
We'll
pretty
share we'll
relevant in
share it,
the
but
early
keep
2010s.
names hidden.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But yeah, you mentioned that you kind of initially wanted to start in a newspaper, and I guess in the early to mid 2000s, writing online was sort of this new thing that I'm sure
Hmm.
was kind of new to everybody. In what ways has just kind of the industry changed in your mind since taking that job?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so much. I went to college, and it was you were kind of directed into different categories at our journalism school at Ohio University, which was a great journalism program. But again, it seems very quaint now to think that we had news writing and editing, which is what I was in. We had magazine writing, which was a separate thing. We had broadcast, which was a separate thing. And you should you should do all of those things and more, and now there should be a maybe a social media wing or two. But I mean, all these things are part of your job. And so I look back and wish that I had done more broadcast stuff because it become such a big part of your life and multimedia, and learn more about I mean, it would be all outdated now anyway, but learn more about editing and what do I production, like website production, that sort of thing. But still was able to have some opportunities down there that informed that later. But yeah, it's changed so much. It's changed so much even since I've been in MLB.com. We used to, you know, we churn out a lot of content. We used to churn out even more. We've learned through the years what resonates with people and what doesn't, quite frankly. We've learned a lot of places where we're just kind of spinning our wheels and writing for the sake of writing and, and not being seen by many people because there's only, you have to do it in a targeted way. So I think about when I was on a beat, uh, you know, 20 years ago now, and blogging 1,000 words before the game, on top of 1,000 word notebook before the game, writing a preview of the next day's starting pitcher, then writing a running game story, then writing a full game story, maybe writing a feature on top of that, and now you see that game coverage has changed so much to where we just try to tell the story of the day, and maybe that is in the game, maybe it's not in the game. People generally, if they come to our site, they know what happened in the game. So let's tell them maybe something they don't know or go inside of the story, as opposed to just relaying play by play that they can get anywhere and probably already know anyway. So yeah, and then of course, the social media component has become its own animal, and now we try to have more of a multimedia presence. So for instance, my first day in Guardians camp this year, I wrote a story, but I also did a tap story where people can tap through and kind of like a reporter mailbag kind of thing. So those are fun to put together and people like them. So like I said, now we have metrics on everything, just like the teams themselves and the play, evaluating players. We can evaluate our readership and we can see, all right, that did really good traffic. Let's go down that road. This didn't do as well. Okay, we tried and it didn't work, and let's move on. So it's a fun challenge to kind of always be figuring out where your audience is going and what's important to them.
What's the process like of kind of figuring out like what is the story of the day if it's not the game, maybe if it's not, if you got to go a little bit beyond the surface level, like do you look to Baseball Savant? Do you look to what people have told you? Like how, like I'm assuming that process probably changes every day, but what would you say it looks like maybe on an average day, if such a thing
Well,
exists?
yeah, there's no average day, but you do develop a feel for the game over the course of time, covering it within the season. You kind of get a sense of storylines as they're developing, and you have to think like a fan thinks. And all right, what moves the needle? What are people interested in? What are people talking about? Sometimes they're telling you what the story should be based on just what's resonating online. Social media is a great window into fans' line of thinking. And we have access that's tremendous in baseball that other sports frankly don't have. We could be around these guys every day. And so if you are covering a team, if you are a beat reporter for a team, you develop relationships with all the people around, and you're always I'll give you an example. From my very brief and illustrious time as the Guardians beat writer here in spring training camp, I've been able to learn a little bit more about Emmanuel Clase, who's one of the best closers in baseball. I don't really know anything about the guy away from the field. But just the other day, I was talking to one of the clubhouse attendants who's friendly with him, and he was saying, "Oh, he's always showing me pictures of his roosters and horses and chickens that he raises on his ranch down in the Dominican Republic." Like, I didn't know anything about that. That's kind of interesting. And he's got this sprawling ranch, and it's remote, it's kind of secluded. And you think about his job as so high intensity, high electricity, ninth inning, flames on the scoreboard and all that. And then when the season's over, he goes to this kind of solitude and quiet of his ranch and raises his roosters. I thought that was pretty cool. So, so you're just always you're trying to get to know these guys better. You're trying to get to know the game better. The game is always changing, always evolving. There's always so many interesting stories within it. I'm fascinated by every element of baseball. I'm fascinated by the personalities in the game, but I'm just as fascinated by what front offices value. They're always trying to outdo each other and be ahead of the curve. And when you're around and in a market like Cleveland, that has a really well regarded front office, they always have to be looking for the next competitive advantage because they don't have the payroll of other teams. So that stuff is just always interesting to me. And so yeah, I've never been bored. I've been frustrated at times, or There's times where baseball just kind of consumes you because it is every day, but I've certainly never been bored, and that's a good thing in your work life.
I never knew that Emmanuel Clase lived the Johnny Cueto life
That's
with the
right. That's
ranch.
right. We don't have a photo of him on a horse like we got in Cueto, though. We got to work on that.
Yeah, I'm sure that's coming.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I guess to kind of follow up on that, talking about how the industry has evolved, also the way we kind of look at baseball has evolved. I'm sure, evaluating players and describing players and what they've done is a lot different now than it was in 2004. So
Hmm.
in what ways have you kind of adjusted, maybe how you talk about players or what numbers you talk about with
Yeah.
just the evolution of information that's available?
Yeah, I mean, that's literally what my book is about because I don't come at baseball writing and baseball fandom from a statistical mathematical bent, not at all. It was probably my least favorite subject in school was math. And so to think now that I have to incorporate all this math into my work is, if you had told me that 20 years ago, I mean, there's no way I would have believed that. I came at it like, I just want to be a storyteller. I just want to, you know, tell a good story. And sure, I'll throw a guy's batting average and home runs and RBI. That was the mold back then. That's what we did. Win loss record. That's what we did. But you can't cover baseball well without learning and understanding that stuff. And I've actually quite enjoyed the process. I mean, there's no way I'm anywhere near as uh, frankly just smart and savvy as a guy like Mike Petriello at our company, who's like Mr. Statcast. He's so good at that, and he's so articulate about that in a way I could never be. But I've done a fair bit of learning, and so I enjoyed writing a book that was for people like me who think this stuff is just for nerds and saying, well, no, I mean, it's actually kind of fun if you learn what it is and how to use it. You can actually enjoy the game even more. So that's why a fan's guide to analytics exists, is just to make it fun, to make math fun. So there I am plugging my book, but I'm very genuine when I say that, like, I could not have imagined writing a book like that when I started baseball writing. But that's kind of the point, is like, if you're not learning in this game, you're doing it wrong, because there's always something to learn.
I'm
Right.
glad you mentioned the book because I actually did want to ask about that. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about the evolution of baseball over 20 years, but we're coming up on 5 years since you wrote that book, A Fan's Guide to Baseball Analytics. And Chris and I were doing this very podcast in 2020 when that book was published. And I can speak for, I think, both of us when I say we remember how a lot of those analytics were viewed at the time. Do you think that there's kind
Mhm.
of been like a general shift in the maybe the attitude towards things like wins above replacement, OPS plus, even like something as simple as OPS in the last 5 years?
Well, you're always going to have certain fans who just have a natural aversion to that or anything new, quite frankly, and that's fine. The thing about MLB.com, where I work, is we have to cater to all manner of baseball fans. There's a site like Fangraphs that is obviously oriented towards people who are more analytically inclined, whereas our site, yeah, we cater to those people, and we also cater to the more casual fan. And we write stuff that gets aggregated elsewhere and all that. So it's a fun challenge to kind of be all things to all people. But to answer your question, yeah, I mean, we're constantly like, baseball fans are really smart, like, generally speaking. And I haven't covered other sports. I've covered other sports, but not, like, obviously not to the extent that I've covered Major League Baseball. But fans are with it, man, and you see it. I mean, you go around and I write things about every team, so you even see within certain fan bases. I mean, people are just wily, and they keep you on your toes. And if you make a mistake, they'll let you know about it. So I love that, and they challenge you to be better and to learn more. And so yeah, I mean, I just think it's only natural when it's what is being used to decide how your roster is constructed. It's only natural that fans are going to take on more of an understanding of it, because they're invested in the product, they're invested in the team, and they want to know why'd you change this guy, why'd you trade this guy, I don't know, why'd you trade Luis Arias, who won a batting title, well, because defensively or power, like, you understand the total picture in a way you maybe didn't before. And I think I mean, Luis Arias could play for my team, by the way, but I'm just giving an example. So I think there's been a natural maturation on the part of fans, but you are also going to have the fans who go, make the war what is it good for joke as if they're the first one to ever make it. So hopefully the book reached some of those people. I'm not sure.
Yeah, yeah, and since then, as we've mentioned, numbers kind of evolve. So like especially specifically on like Baseball Savant and whatnot, um, there's always a lot of new developments. I remember I think like infield outs above average started around 2019, and
Yeah.
in the last few years we've been introduced to like catcher framing runs, obviously bat
Mhm.
speed, and new base running statistics. So as an observer and someone who uses some of these tools for your writing, what have been kind of some of your favorite new features that you've been able to just either observe or even just use yourself?
Well, I just love where defense has come. And that's the one thing in my book where I said, as you guys said, I was writing it in 2019. It came out in 2020. And in there, I wrote that, the gist of what we have at this point is what we have. And there's only so much more you can do with wins above replacement or offensive stats and pitching stats. But I did write in there that, defense was still not untapped, but, relative to the others. And that's still kind of the case. But even in the last 5 years, I mean, we've made tremendous strides with defense. Outs above average. When I wrote the book, it was only available. I'm trying to remember now. It started in the outfield, right, and then went to the infield. I think infield came out right around the time the book came out for the first time, and I think that catching defense is still. I mean, I don't know if they'll ever crack that one, but that's probably still the most hard to quantify thing is the value of a good catcher. So, to answer your question, I just generally I think defense is the one where it's like, wow, I mean, we used to just be scrambling and looking at fielding percentage and the eye test and things like that. And now we just have so much. I mean, we have it down to is he better to his right or his left? And the outfielder's arm versus his range and the catcher's pop time versus his framing. I mean, it's awesome. And they're always looking for new ways to relay. And then some of it's wonky and some of it goes over the vast majority of people's heads. But there's always an audience for any new development they can make statistically. There's always some group of people who are excited by that.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to go a little bit back because you were a Cleveland, then Indians baseball, or you were the beat writer from I believe 2006 to 2010, and then you went national. Before like social media took over and we knew everything about everyone and the ways that we do now. Like, what was it like to make that transition from covering one team to all of them?
Yeah. Yeah, it was overwhelming. You kind of just well, two things. You relied on what made you hopefully good as a beat writer, just making that extra effort, making that extra phone call, whatever it was. And then also like it was just frankly helpful that baseball people move around so much and it felt like wherever you go, you knew somebody that you had crossed paths with somewhere else along the way. And that's a good break in. But when you just go where the story is, cover the postseason. I mean, you just you develop relationships and you develop a feel for how different organizations are run. You come across all of them at one time or another. Spring training was really the best environment. I mean, spring training is just the best. I love it because, like I was saying to you guys earlier, I mean, everybody's in a good mood is kind of the cliche, but like you're getting people at their best, and it's a low pressure environment where you can work a clubhouse more easily than you can during the regular season. You can get around to a lot of teams in an efficient manner. I mean, I'm here in Arizona, everyone knows, half the teams are here and they're all in the Phoenix area. So you can go see when you get into spring schedule as day games and night games. I mean, you could go crazy. You could go 4 or 5 teams in a day if you really wanted to. If you really wanted to put your rental car to work and your body to work, you could absolutely make that happen. So I love it as a great tool in my line of work to to get to know people and do it's fun and interesting. I mean, there's a lot that's more homogenous now than when I first started covering baseball, everyone knows that front office guys have become and gals have become very similarly aligned in terms of what they value, and we've seen how that operates in free agency, quite frankly. But there is still like a different culture in each organization, and how they run their spring camps, how they organize their rosters for the regular season. So I love seeing the kind of differences within that.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And yeah, I mean, for the most part, over the last decade or so, you've been mostly covering the whole league. And what was that kind of transition like, and how did the like how may you enjoy parts more than others, and
Yeah.
in both directions?
Yeah, it's always that you wrestle with that a little bit. Like I was saying to people out here where, when you're embedded with one team every day, there's good and bad with that. I like bouncing around. I like seeing different teams, getting to know different players. There's always a new wave of young talent. There's always just somewhat interesting in every camp, that sort of thing. But there is also something to be said for when with a team every day, just the relationships you build. And it's nice when you write something and then you can follow up with the player the next day, or he says, "Yeah, I read the piece you wrote. I was thinking about this," and like it's just you don't get that when you're just bouncing around. So there's good and bad with both. I generally will prefer the variety, and that's what I've done for the last 15 years is have variety in my work life where I'm just chasing the interesting stories and telling them in different ways. We do a lot of video features now with MLB Network, and so it's not just the written portion. So there's always something new, and we launched a podcast last year that's like a game coverage podcast. So like what I'm saying is no 2 years, no two seasons have been the same for me in the national role. Like we're always trying different things at MLB.com, and I really like that. And we do try different things on the beats too, but again, that's generally going to be more static. The job is the job, year after year. So for me, I'm more bent towards just the creativity and constant evolution and trying different things and going to different places. But I do see why people do get addicted to beat coverage because the relationships become so strong and it just becomes kind of second nature that this is my team. I know it inside and out, and this is what I do.
I do want to talk about some of the work that you are doing currently. You covered a Cactus League Media Day today and talked to people from several different organizations. Just what were kind of some of your takeaways from your coverage of that today?
Yeah, you just kind of recapping. All the GMs are there, the GMs and the managers. A lot of it's just kind of rote, just recapping the off season and previewing the season, that sort of thing. But the big thing to come out of that was the automatic ball strike challenge system. There was a demonstration of how that functions, and I've gotten the chance to see it quite a bit in the minor leagues, and they've had it at the Futures game the last couple of years. But there's been a lot of change in baseball in the last couple of years. It feels like we've been asking a lot of questions at this time of year about how do you prepare for the pitch clock? How do you prepare for the shift restrictions and all that? This one's a little different in that there's no plan to have it in the big leagues this season. So it's just a spring training, experiment and get some feedback. But, you see, it's interesting to see the league operate. And I've got to know those guys well who are behind, the rule changes in recent years. And you see, these are people who just love baseball and want the best version of baseball possible. And so how do you use the technology at your disposal to get that outcome? And it was interesting because the pitch clock was a no-brainer. I mean, it was hard to implement and it was a big change, but it was a no-brainer. Like we all see what's going on here. We all see that, the average game time is over 3 hours, and we all see the dead time between pitches. We have to do something about it. And they did something about it, and, it worked wonderfully, I think. And I think the ratings and attendance show that. But the ball strike thing is a different thing. It's not, contrary to what people might think who watch a game and have a little box there and think they know more than the home plate umpire. Like umpiring is actually pretty good, especially relative to the difficulty of the job. Talked about Manuel Clase earlier. He throws a 99-mile-an-hour cutter. You stand back there and get that right. They do actually a really good job. And so it becomes this philosophical discussion of, okay, how important is it to have every call with the utmost accuracy, knowing that if you do that, because they tried a full robot ump, and it actually really slows the game down, and there's more walks, and so there's unintended consequences with it. So then they come with this compromise, the challenge system, and again, they know that works, and now we're going to see the feedback for that. I happen to think it's awesome, and I happen to think it will be implemented in the major leagues in the near future, but it is something they want to make sure they have right. But it's not the no-brainer that the pitch clock was, because it's like, well, do we even have a problem here? Because actually half the time that people challenge a call, only half the time is it overturned. So it goes to show on the quote unquote most controversial calls, the umpires are still right half the time. So that's a pretty good percentage, actually.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's certainly, I guess, another conversation about the purity of baseball and like the tradition of it. And some people like their managers arguing with umpires and getting them kicked out and getting the team fired up, as the cliche goes. But yeah, Daniel, did we have any more questions before we wanted to get to the classic final question?
Yeah, I did have a couple. One, I was actually about the ABS stuff. I saw your article earlier today. And is it just, I haven't gotten a chance to read it yet because I've been busy with my own work, but are they bringing in like the full ABS or just the challenge system for spring training?
Yeah, just the challenge system. They about, I don't know, midway through the AAA season last year, they just kicked full ABS to the curb. They tried it for a bit, and it was pretty overwhelming. Fan polling, player, manager, personnel. I mean, people hated it, quite frankly. So, I mean, you hear all the time, robot umps now when a call is wrong, but again, be careful what you wish for, because they did give it the old college try, and they found it just wasn't popular. It dragged the game on. It is a much different strike zone than players are accustomed to. Like there is an art to umpiring, quite frankly, where a 9-0 game is a different thing than a 1-1 game. And like, let's move things along. The zone expands quite a bit. So, that's not maybe quite as much as it used to be, because umpires are graded, on their ball strike calls. But, there is a human element to umpiring that people are leery of doing away with completely. So yeah, midway through last year, they just devoted themselves fully to the challenge system.
Is there any sort of maybe specific result that MLB is looking to see with the challenge system in spring, or is it more of just we're going to put it there and see what it looks like type of thing?
Yeah, they don't get to this point where they try it in major league games without knowing what it's going to look like. I mean, they have it down to like what are the most common counts where challenges are, initiated, and they have it down to innings even. But they just generally want feedback, like how do you feel about this within the game flow, and also just operational issues. They've done this enough in AAA that they've been able to iron out some kinks in the technology, but it's technology. There's always going to be something. There might be pitches that, for whatever reason, a glitch in the matrix and they don't capture. And that's another reason why the challenge is better to full ABS, because you go full ABS, now the umpire behind the plate, probably zones out. He's not like locked into every pitch. Whereas in this, he still is. So it's like, if there is, for some reason, a technological glitch where a guy challenges a pitch and they don't have the Hawkeye call, okay, no big deal. We just go with the umpire's call, that as we would anyway. So that's all kind of interesting. So they just want feedback from people, and again, see how the technology works on a more expanded basis, and go from there.
And I do have a Guardian specific question. This is about someone that you wrote about the other day that I texted you about, just because you and I have both covered him to some degree. But Travis Bazan is in his first professional spring training camp. Obviously, the reigning 1-1. What have you seen out of the wonder from down under so far?
Yeah, I saw him in Lake County, Single A last year, and we had a long chat, and good one. He's a very, we talk about how much the game has evolved and changed, and a lot of that is player preparation and their technology. And they're certainly better conditioned than they were when I first started covering baseball. I'm old enough now that I've covered guys smoking in the clubhouse after the game. You don't see that anymore. You see, I mean, guys really get after it. And, he is a very thoughtful young guy. He has a very intense preparation for games. We'll see how it translates to the professional environment. I mean, I remember laughing because he's telling me, I meditate. I take this much BP. I take this many rounds of fielding practice. I do this and this and this. But the meditation made me laugh because it's like, well, where's the meditation room in East Lake, Ohio? I don't think they have one at the Lake County facility. So it was an adjustment for him to apply this, really intense pregame rituals he has from Oregon State. And now go do it when you're on the road and playing the Great Lakes Loons. So he admits freely that he had there was a solid month where he was just kind of searching for it, but he did catch on, and, he was able to help them in their playoff run. And, he's off and running. We'll see. Now he's in his first big league camp. He's not in the big league clubhouse. He's what they call depth camp. I always have to pronounce it as best I can so it doesn't sound like death camp, because that would be a whole different thing.
No.
So I think you'll see him in some big league games this spring. So that'll be fun to see. And he could move quickly. We see that in today's game. It's another big change is draft prospects. He used to be a guy like Travis Bazzana, drafted number 1 overall. Okay, cool. See you in 5 years, maybe. Now it's like, hey, we might see you next year.
You
Paul
might be
Skeens
starting the
started
All-Star game.
Yeah, exactly. I told him, hey, Skeens was 1-1 and he started the All-Star game the next year, so no pressure. We'll see.
Yeah, if I remember he serves me correct, I was trying to find the article that I wrote on him, but I believe he was a psych major at Oregon State and used his classes like kind of as a way to well, not specifically directly, but use his classes as a way to learn meditation skills that help him in baseball.
Yeah, that's not surprising. Like I said, really thoughtful kid. He does everything with intention. That's what I would say.
All right, Chris, you want to take away with the classic last question?
Yeah, so the question we've asked to all our guests since probably about 2021, it's kind of it's above replacement radio centric, but yeah. So if you could go back, if you could retrieve the Statcast data of one player in history pre-Statcast era, so like someone who retired before 2015 or played most of their career before 2015, and you could get all their metrics and also like all their percentiles, so you get to see where they ranked among the rest of the league. But you don't get, if you select someone from 1955, you don't get the other 1955 data. You just get this player's
just that
data.
One guy.
If you could go back into history, who would you choose?
Yeah, well, I mean, my head first goes, my favorite player growing up was Corey Snyder. My dad's favorite player growing up was Rocky Colavito. They were both on the Indians, and they both were similar in that they hit the ball super hard, and that's about all they did. A lot of times they didn't hit the ball at all. But I would want to, perhaps see the hard hit data there. But just generally, it's kind of a generic answer. I want to know as much as possible about Babe Ruth, right? He changed baseball. And, there's a thing with Adam Ottavino saying I would strike out Babe Ruth, and he's not wrong. He would absolutely strike out Babe Ruth. But yeah, I want to know how long was that trot around the bases. So we would have that, right? I would want to know how hard he hit the ball relative to today's players. What was his, what was his exit velo? It would be fascinating to know the true numbers, because everything from that time is totally just frankly made up. People just saying a rocket off the bat. Bob Feller had his velocity tested against a motorcycle, he threw the ball 105 miles an hour. Well, did he? Let's see that. Let's find out. But I don't know who isn't fascinated by Babe Ruth. Such a unique player in baseball history.
Well, you say it's a generic answer. I don't believe we've actually gotten that one before. I could be wrong. Right? Chris, do you recall another person saying Babe Ruth?
No, we've had a variety of different answers. We've had like Willie Mays, Keith Hernandez, Dave Winfield, Josh Gibson, Barry Bonds,
Nolan Ryan,
a variety of people. But I don't know if we've gone as far back as Babe Ruth. So that's something we appreciate as people who also enjoy history.
Yeah, I just think I'm not trying to trample on the dead. I have great respect for Babe Ruth being so much better than the rest of the league in his time. But I'm just one of those people who's like, LeBron versus Jordan. I mean, give me a LeBron a million times out of a million. I mean, if they played one-on-one, make it, take it, and LeBron has the ball first, I don't think Michael Jordan gets the ball. It's just, that's evolution. He's just a superior athlete because he came up in a different time with different things available to him, and we'll be saying that about people who come after him. And so, to think that Bob Feller had a better fastball than Ben Joyce of the Angels at 105, like absolutely not, because Ben Joyce had more resources at his disposal. He better have a better fastball than Bob Feller. That's just evolution. But yeah, you'd love to know the real data for sure.
Yeah,
maybe in this hypothetical we get like the velocity Babe Ruth is facing.
Yeah,
that would answer a lot of questions that people have. I don't know. I don't think we've ever gone that deep into this hypothetical, but maybe you go on like the radial chart on Savant and it shows like the little pitch velocity and it's like, oh, this is the big one, 75.6 miles an hour.
Yeah, he didn't face the 99-mile-an-hour cutter, that's for sure.
with 35 inches of drop.
One of my favorite things about the Olympics happening this past year is every 4 years it's like new world records, new Olympic records. In fact, there all the records that were set in 1924 have actually been broken since then. And I'm sure in the same way that running and swimming have evolved, baseball has also evolved, despite what Super 70 Sports might tell you on Twitter.
I know. I without naming names, I was once interviewing somebody, and it was I don't want to say what it was, but it was someone in baseball. He was making the point like the beauty, and this is something that a lot of people say, the beauty of baseball is it hasn't changed, and it's been around for over 100 years, and you could go to a game 100 years ago and it would still have the same feel as today's game. I was like, this isn't true at all. Like the game is nothing like it was in Babe Ruth's time. It's just absolutely not. For one, there's black people in the stands and on the field. Let's start there. And so yeah, I mean, just we keep going as a species, and we will keep going. And you guys and I are on Zoom right now, and if we did this conversation in 5 years, we'd be on some other thing, some other platform, and that's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, personally, I've kept the trend going of like I bring my straw hat and suit to every game that I go to. So I've tried to keep that tradition going.
I miss when they threw out the first pitch from the stands. They had some guy in the front row just throw it like 7 feet onto the field.
That's right. And Queen Elizabeth, the Naked Gun, she had a screwball from the stands. So
yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think that's all we have for you. Thank you very much for taking the time with us. We've really enjoyed this conversation. And yeah, thank you. Follow Anthony's work on his Twitter and obviously MLB.com. He's always very active there. So but yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys, and keep up the above replacement work.
Thank you very much.
This conversation is over.